Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rogue Squadron. I am your host, Philip, and in today's episode, we are going to be taking a trip back to the wonderful franchise of Marvel, and we are going to be discussing one of their latest projects in maybe a little movie, series that you guys have heard of. We are going to be discussing Venom: The Last Dance. So this movie has definitely been out for a while, so I am a little late to reviewing it and discussing it. However, after seeing it and getting the opportunity to do so, we are going to talk about it now. I'm like currently doing like three things at once, so I apologize if I'm looking like everywhere left and right. But yeah, we are going to be talking about Venom: The Last Dance. Um, so this film came out, I believe, October 25th of 2024. So it came out just about a good month ago. The content rating for this film is PG-13. It is considered an action adventure sci-fi thriller, and it was directed by Kelly Marcel. So if you're wondering what else she directed, um, the only things that I'm seeing currently on here are a TV show called The Dark Adapted Eye and The Blacklist. Those are the only two shows that she has directed. The Blacklist is a very popular show, so she definitely gets a positive for that mark. Other than that, however, I don't really see anything else worthwhile that she directed, which could have been a problem with the film in the first place. Before we continue on with our review of Venom: The Last Dance, I thought I'd just let you know how I'm doing. So I actually just recorded an episode before this. So by the time you are watching this, my review and critique on Red One would have came out on December 2nd, I believe. Um, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. Just a nice little like holiday video to get you guys into the beginning of December and Christmas and holiday season. Um, other than that, I've been super crazy busy at work. Obviously, with the holiday season, getting a bunch of hours. So most of my time is dedicated towards that. So I'm squeezing in going to the gym, going to therapy, doing this, doing that. In any of the free time that I have. Okay, that didn't work. That was just a waste of time. Um, so. Yeah, I'm trying the best I can to kind of keep up with the podcast and when I see a movie, get a review out for you guys. I like to call it more of like a critique than a review because I don't actually sit here and like go over the movie. I kind of just give you what my pros and cons are. What the budget was, how much it made in the box office. The actors, the cast. Blah blah blah. So it's more of like a critique and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I'm doing the best I can. Trying to stay nice and healthy as my body is not used to the freezing temperatures of New York and the change of seasons. So I'm doing my best not to get sick. Um, but yeah, other than that, I am doing pretty good. So hopefully everybody enjoyed their Thanksgiving and their Black Friday shopping weekend. And everybody is getting looking forward to the holidays coming up and spending time with family and celebrating those. But with that being said, we are going to continue with our little thoughts and opinions and critique of Venom: The Last Dance. Excuse me. So obviously we just went over who directed the film. Let's just take a quick look at the cast just to give you guys a heads up on who is in the film. Um, so not exactly the most star-studded cast, at least from what I'm seeing. Some of these people I just don't recognize, unfortunately. But obviously we have Tom Hardy returning as Eddie Brock. We have Juno Temple, who is playing Dr. Teddy Payne. She was actually in the Ted Lasso TV series, if you guys have seen that. We have Reese Ifans playing a character known as Martin. He is actually in House of the Dragon as Otto Hightower, so you guys will recognize him from that. Um, we have Stephen Graham as Detective Mulligan. He makes an appearance once again. I think he's been in a couple of other projects, so he is fairly recognizable. We have Cristo Fernandez playing the barman. He was also from the Ted Lasso series, so you guys will definitely recognize him as Danny Rojas, who football is life. And then finally, really, we just have Andy Serkis, who's actually playing Null, the main protagonist and villain of this film. We don't see him for very long, but he is voicing and playing him. So he always does a phenomenal role as those villains and stuff. So they definitely picked the right man for the job there. Um, excuse me. Getting into a little bit of like, the critical and the audience score, we're going to be looking at a couple of different places. To start, obviously, we're going to be looking at IMDb. So IMDb gave Venom the Last Dance a 6.2 out of 10. Overall, a pretty warranted score. This was a pretty average film. I think the Venom trilogy can kind of be summed up as that. Again, wasn't the best thing since sliced bread, but it is pretty bad when we just went over Red 1, and that was given about a 6.9, and that also wasn't the best thing in the whole world. So, yeah, obviously getting a 6 out of 10 is a pretty average score for IMDb, and I think in this case it is pretty warranted. We'll obviously get into the pros and the cons in a little bit, but yeah, based on what they scored this, it makes total sense. Um, we are going to move to Rotten Tomatoes now, where everybody, you know that we love Rotten Tomatoes on this channel. Rotten Tomatoes, as far as the critic score, they gave it a score of 41%. So again, critics are definitely very low on this movie. Just kind of looking at a quick consensus from the critics, they basically say that the always watchable Tom Hardy injects ample charisma into Venom the Last Dance, but the offering buckles under its convoluted tonal ambitions. Um, yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that for once, at least, for the critic score. They're always harsh, but I mean, they're critics. It's their job. That's what they're supposed to do. However, like I said, we usually care more about what the audience score says, and the audience score for this film is an 81%, which is pretty average and actually a pretty good audience score for this film. So I am definitely happy to see that. Overall, the audience basically says how a truly thrilling send off for now. Venom the Last Dance brings Eddie and Venom back for a tit to tat that's hilarious and steeped in 90s vibes, and stay for the post credit scenes. Don't stay for the post credit scenes because they are totally worthless, and it's just a waste of time, honestly. Um, especially the one all the way at the very end, totally worthless. So don't stay for either of them. That's the one thing I disagree with with the audience. Do not stay for any of the post credits. They are not worth it. Um, that is coming from somebody that's cleaned these theaters. Please do not stay for them. It is not worth it. Um, but yeah, we are going to be looking further now. So obviously, again, the scores are pretty average and where I would expect them to be for both IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes. So that is, nothing to really write home about. The audience score is great, so I do love to see that. So again, the audience obviously loved it a little bit more, well, at least double the amount that the critics did. So I think 81% for the audience score is extremely fair, and that's probably where I would put it if I was part of the audience too. Now we're going to go over something that I think should be touched upon because, it actually is pretty important. So according to a quick Google search, the budget for this film was about 120 million USD. Um, a pretty low budget for a Marvel film compared to Red One, which I believe had a budget of like 250 million. So far, according to what I found, the gross revenue in the box office um, is about $401.69 million. So it made back pretty much four times its budget, which is great. I mean, a Marvel movie is going to do that. It's going to bring people to the theaters. The theaters were pretty packed when this movie came out. So, I could definitely speak from experience. On that point, I'm seeing an article right now saying that Venom the Last Dance is now the 10th biggest hit of 2024 at the global box office. That is actually a pretty decent stat considering that this year has been pretty good for movies overall. So the fact that this is like, the 10th highest grossing movie of this year is actually really good. So I definitely think, looking at the box office and the budget for this film is extremely important, and the fact that it's made over like four times its budget is extremely good. So that definitely is a very positive sign and definitely a positive to take out of this movie. Now, after discussing all of that, now it is time to rip this movie apart and talk about the pros and the cons. So, just like how we did for Red 1, we're going to start with the cons because we want to end on a good note here. So, we are going to be looking at the cons. Um, so, right off the bat, one of the things that is a total con about this film is the tonal inconsistencies. So, obviously, the film struggles with tonal shifts, sometimes feeling too serious and other times too goofy. This is basically like a direct correlation to Red 1, where I had the same consensus, where like they were trying to go for something serious, but then it ended up being a little bit more entertaining, and they just didn't really balance it correctly. Um, this film definitely follows suit. There are times where I feel like most of the film feels pretty goofy, and then there are some times where they want to shift the tone to make it a little bit more serious and talk about this like impending doom and like the whole world is going to be destroyed. And the next thing you know, they cut to Eddie and Venom in Vegas. So it's like it's not exactly consistent with the tones. If they did a better job, like maybe introducing the villain, which is Null, obviously from the Marvel Comics, one of the strongest villains in the Marvel Comics. Um, I think it would have been a better film. I think if they would have introduced him a little bit more properly, maybe throughout the whole trilogy, um, and stayed a little bit more consistent with their tones, I think they would have done extremely well and a lot better. I don't think the funny moments are bad, and I mean when they are goofy, it is fun and enjoyable. And again, the dynamic between Eddie and Venom definitely shines in this movie. However, again, if there was a little bit more consistency throughout the film with the tone, it definitely would have made for better storytelling, and it definitely would have boosted the scores, I think, for a lot of people, to be honest. Something else that this film kind of failed to do, unfortunately, was develop their characters. So obviously, we have a lot of undeveloped characters in this film. So new characters and the central antagonist are seen as underdeveloped and not as engaging as expected. So obviously, again, we just touched upon this. We have Null, who is a extremely successful villain in the Marvel comics, and we see him basically introduced in the very beginning, and then we don't really see him until the first post credit, until after the film. Um, his character is not really flushed out. I mean, his agenda is pretty much flushed out. He wants to escape the prison that he is in so he can go and start conquering worlds. Um, Obviously, we're made to believe that towards the end of the film, Eddie and Venom are successful in denying Noel, that request, and we're meant to think that Noel is still in his prison. However, the first post credit shows that apparently he is now free from that prison, even though he never obtained the key to his freedom. So that just kind of couples with the first con, just total inconsistencies. Um, we don't really know anything about Null. I mean, unfortunately, the only way you're going to find out about Null or any of these new characters that they introduce is if you are an avid fan of the Marvel comics and you have read them front to cover. So they tried to definitely pull too many stories in at once. I mean, for the final movie in the trilogy, you choose this movie to add all these new characters, and then now you're trying to divide an hour and 50-minute movie into different sections to introduce these different characters and to like build a story for them and get people to know them in an hour and 50 minutes, while you're also supposed to be focusing on Null, one of the most impressive villains from the Marvel comics. You're supposed to be focusing on Eddie and Venom. You're supposed to be focusing on all the other symbiotes, and then you're supposed to be focusing on all these new characters. There is no way in hell that they were going to be able to accomplish that in an hour and 50 minutes. Maybe a 2.5 hour, 3 hour movie. Yeah, sure. Could you have written a story for that amount of time? Maybe. I mean, it would have gave them more time to flush out these characters and the villain, and maybe would have, you know, brought people's opinions of these characters up a little bit more. But again, I mean, we have characters, such as Strickland and Dr. Teddy Payne, which I think is a very important character from the comics, and some of these other characters that are just not really brought to life, and we don't really know much about them. I mean, the only thing that we're given about Dr. Teddy Payne, is that she was struck by lightning as a child, and that's it. And then she finds these creatures fascinating. I mean, that's pretty much it. Strickland, we don't know anything about. All we know is that he wants to kill these symbiotes and protect the planet. I mean, that's it. We're not really given any other information about what they're doing with Area 51, why it's shut down, why they have some sort of experimental bunker division there at Area 51. We're not given a lot. And again, that just goes for being underdeveloped characters. Which is why I say don't stick around for the post credits. Because again, like the post credit means nothing. Because how has he escaped from his prison if he never obtained the key to do that in the first place? And then again, the second post credit after all the credits is the barman, who is played by Danny Rojas from Ted Lasso, escaping the facility, and that's it. And then it shows like a little sparkling tube that had part of the Venom symbiote in it, and then a cockroach. So it's like maybe that one, like they're teasing that, like, oh, like the Venom symbiote is still alive and will make another appearance. Okay, yeah, like that makes sense. But again, if you are a Marvel fan and you're keeping up with all the news and stuff like that, you know that Venom is going to make another appearance. So it's like it's not really worth staying that extra 15 minutes for the credit. Um, and honestly, that is the biggest flaw of this film, and that is one of the biggest cons on this list. Is that these characters are underdeveloped, they're not given enough development, and they're introduced too late in the trilogy and too late in the franchise, which ruins the story. It confuses people because you're like, who the hell is that person? Who's that person? And it just kind of takes away from the film, and that's definitely one of the biggest cons that I've seen. Another one we're going to talk about is obviously the plot holes. So some viewers found that the plot is to be rushed and filled with holes, making it less cohesive. This basically couples exactly with the point that I just made about the underdeveloped characters. So because they're trying to rush the development of these characters and introduce them, you are leaving excessive holes in this plot, and now you are basically tying this all in together. These first three cons go hand in hand in hand because when you have plot holes, because of these underdeveloped characters, you get tonal inconsistencies. So these all go hand in hand in hand. And by trying to allocate, a certain amount of time for each of these characters, you're taking away from the plot, and then you're leaving plot holes, and then people are asking questions, and then they're leaving the theater confused, and then now they're upset because they just wasted their money. So again, it's just again it's not the best. I mean, again, trying to rush all these characters and develop them in this final movie really just not only hindered the plot, but it also hindered the tone of this movie. And like I said, all three of these go hand in hand. This is like the holy trinity of why this movie is bad, to be honest. The final thing, again, it's not the best. It's not the worst con, but it definitely could have been improved. Some of the visual effects, especially in the large sequences, can be murky and less impressive. I think the visual effects in the first Venom and then Venom Let There Be Carnage, I think were definitely a lot better than this one. I don't think they were terrible, but it definitely looked like it took a step down. And I think definitely could have been a lot better. But I think this is a very minor con versus all the other things that I just ranted and raved about. So obviously, these scores that IMDb are giving it, that Rotten Tomatoes are giving it, are very warranted, and a lot of people that have been leaving the theaters have the same consensus with these cons. So this is definitely just not my opinion. This is a lot of people's opinions because I've had people talk to me about the film, and they are saying the same exact things. However, we are going to get into some of the few pros that this movie did had to end this trilogy off with some sort of bang. um, Obviously, we have Tom Hardy's performance, so Tom Hardy continues to shine in his dual role as Eddie Brock and Venom, bringing humor and heart to the character. He does a phenomenal job with these two characters. Their dynamic in this whole trilogy, especially in this film, is really heartwarming. It's great. It brings humor. It brings heart, especially with what happens at the end of the film and just what happens throughout the film. It is very heartwarming. It is very touching. It is sad at some point. It is happy at some points. But he does a phenomenal job bringing these two characters to life and really shining in both these roles. Are we going to see Eddie Brock and Venom again? I don't know. We're going to have to leave that up to speculation. I mean, towards the end of the film, we do see Eddie Brock make his way to New York City, so it is possibly teaming up with a reappearance in Spider-Man. Um, and we'll see. I mean, we might see Eddie Brock. We might just see Venom. Who knows? But he definitely does a hell of a job bringing these characters to life, and it's one of the main reasons why I love these films. It's just because of Tom Hardy and his just portrayal as Eddie Brock and Venom. Another thing to look out for is the both silliness and heart of this movie. So this movie does something well, and it does successfully balance the silly, over the top antics with surprisingly emotional moments. And again, that kind of goes back to Tom Hardy's performance, as he's able to give us that silly dynamic between Eddie and Venom while also bringing some seriousness and a little bit of emotion to these two's relationship and their characters. So these two definitely go hand in hand, and again, that has contributed to Tom Hardy and his excellent performance. Um, the action sequences, they are a pro. Again, they are not the best. Sometimes they could be a little visually unappealing or less impressive. But the action scenes are well paced and entertaining with some standout moments. Now, again, they aren't the best. I would have wished that, some of the symbiotes would have stayed around for a little bit longer. They would have been a little bit more impressive. So again, the action sequences are not the best, but they are entertaining, and I think that is important in a film like this. Again, we did see a lot more symbiotes in this movie. Were they flushed out? No. Do we know most of their names? No. Do we know most of their abilities? No. Were they cool to see on screen? Yes. So again, some of these action sequences could have been expanded upon if we knew more about the symbiotes and we had a chance for them to like really bond with a host and see their full potential. But unfortunately, we didn't. But again, I think some of the action sequences are pretty good for a Marvel movie, especially when looking at the Venom trilogy as a whole. Finally, the last pro, which just kind of goes with like really all Marvel movies and just this franchise in general, is the fan service. So for fans of the first two Venom movies, if you did enjoy the first two, you are going to be, I think, overall satisfied. I don't think you're going to be extremely satisfied, but I think you will be pretty content with how the conclusion to this trilogy ends, and what this means for Eddie Brock and Venom in the future. So I think overall it does have a pretty okay conclusion. I wasn't the biggest fan of it, because obviously we've seen that Marvel, versus the comics, they've taken Venom from being a villain to more of an anti-hero. So going along the aspect of Venom as an anti-hero, I think it is a pretty good conclusion to the trilogy. If you want to see Venom as a villain, obviously just stick to the comics, because we know that at least for the MCU, they're making him an anti-hero. And again, I think going that route, I think they do bring a pretty successful conclusion to the trilogy. It is sad. It is definitely pulling at the heartstrings after watching the two of them go through this journey together over these last three movies. But I do think it is pretty good. And like I said, there is the possibility of their return in a future Marvel project. So we will just have to wait and see what happens. But that is pretty much it for my pros and cons. So again, I think some things to take away from this film. Tom Hardy brings a brilliant performance as Eddie Brock in Venom. He brings some silliness and heart to the two characters throughout the film. Some of the action sequences and the fan service was pretty decent and overall good for the movie. However, again, there is the holy trinity of cons. You're going to have some tonal inconsistencies, you're going to have some underdeveloped characters, and you're going to have some plot holes. And sometimes, depending on the sequence, the visual effects might not all be there. So definitely take this movie with a grain of salt when you go see it. My advice, just like how I said for Red One, do not pay full price for this movie. This movie is still out in theaters. How it is still out in theaters, I have no idea. Please wait for a discount Tuesday or a matinee ticket to save some money and see this film. Is it worth seeing in movies? Yes, it is. I mean, it's the conclusion of the trilogy, so I definitely think it is worth a watch. But again, do not pay full price for this movie. If you are just teasing yourself, and it's not worth it. Yeah, go see this on some sort of discounted day or for a matinee price. Yeah, I mean, I think I would personally give it about a 7.5 out of 10 suns. Again, overall I enjoyed the movie. Most of these cons that I listed are, my own personal cons. They're definitely things that I saw that were wrong with the film and could have been done a whole hell of a lot better. However, I do really enjoy Tom Hardy, and I enjoy his performance as both Eddie and Venom, and they do bring a lot of heart and silliness to the film. And it was cool seeing the symbiotes fight, the alien creatures that Null sent down to Earth. So I think overall it was a decent end to the trilogy. The Venom trilogy as a whole, obviously, is not the best. It doesn't have the best ratings, but I personally love them, and I like Eddie Brock and Venom as a character, and I like the symbiotes. So yeah, I mean, I think overall I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10. Again, something to also keep in mind is that they did make back 4 times their budget, so that is extremely good, especially for a movie with these ratings and obviously all these cons. So again, go see it in theaters. Do not pay full price. About a 7.5 out of 10 suns for yours truly. And yeah, that is pretty much all I have for this episode. So thank you guys for coming out to another wonderful episode of Rogue Squadron, where we broke down and we talked about Venom: The Last Dance. So if you're wondering where you can find more of this lovely channel and podcast, you can find us on social media at Instagram and TikTok at Rogue Squadron, as well as watching these lovely videos on YouTube at The Rogue Squadron. So like I said, Red One was posted on December 2nd. So if you guys have not checked that one out yet, please go back and watch that one. And then this one will be posted on December 9th. So I'm trying to record a couple of videos ahead of time while I still have the time before I get bogged down with the holidays and work and whatnot. So like I said, yeah, if you guys want to see more, leave your comments and suggestions down below in the videos. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Thank you once again for tuning in. Until we see each other again, I hope you have a great day, great afternoon, great evening, great night. You stay safe, you do not do anything stupid, and you are enjoying the month of December so far and getting ready for holiday season and spending time with family and friends. But until we see each other again, thank you guys for coming by and stopping by, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye for now.